Okay, in this video we're going to talk about the wiring and how to connect all of the circuit boards together. We're going to start and look at the power wiring. So the main source of power for your robot is the included lithium-ion battery, this blue battery here. What's the connections for this battery? It should be pretty obvious. We're going to connect up this XT60 connector to the matching connector on the power distribution board. There's also this white 4-pin connector. That's going to connect up to this 4-pin connector right here. This is the balance port. It's used by some of the charging circuitry to make sure that all 3 of the cells inside the battery stay at the correct voltage and they don't exceed their maximum voltage. So that's where the power goes into the robot. From the distribution board, there's these 2 terminal blocks, this ground terminal block and this 4-pin terminal block, which gives us 4 points that we can get access to the 12 volts from the battery. So we're going to use those 2 terminal blocks to hook up some power wires to power the Pi and the hat, and as well as the motor controller. So you should have, your kit should have included some red and black power wires. Let's look where to hook those up. So let's start by connecting. So we have a positive and negative. We have a positive and negative terminal here. So let's start by connecting a red wire from the positive pin here down to positive pin here. And we're going to take a black wire and go from the negative here over to one of these negative terminals. Same thing up here. We're going to go for the motor controller. We're going to take a black wire from the negative and go into one of the ground terminals. And we're going to take a positive wire for the motor controller and we're going to come over to one of these terminals. Now let's just take a look actually at the terminal block, the 12 volt terminal block on the power distribution board. You'll notice there's four terminals. 2 are labeled 11 amps and 2 are labeled 3 amps. There are fuses and current limiting devices on the power distribution board. And we can use those different connectors, different points on the terminal block to power different types of devices. So the motor controller, for example, will typically or can use a lot of current. So we're going to hook up its positive wire into one of the 11 amp terminals, which is one of these 2 on the right. The Pi and the Pi hat don't need that much current, so we'll connect them up. We'll connect up its red wire to the one of the 3 amp contacts. For the ground contact, they're all the same. It doesn't matter which black wire goes where. For example, there's no 11 amp and 3 amp ground wires. All the ground contacts are the same. So if you had any additional circuitry, let's say you had some other circuit board or some other type of motor controller or something like that that needed power, you could get access to the battery's 12 volt power by using these ground and 12 volt terminals. Okay, so that's the power connections. Let's look at some of the other data connections now that need to be made. So in your kit, there should be 2 lengths of ribbon cable. It's a gray cable with a black connector at each end. We're going to use one of those to connect from the user interface board over into this pin header right here. So it's labeled user interface. So we're going to connect up to that. That sends power and some data communication to the user interface board. The other ribbon cable is going to connect from this charger connector right here on the Pi hat down to this similar connector on the power distribution board. So we'll take that other ribbon cable and we will connect it like this. The 2 ribbon cables are the same. Doesn't matter which one you use where. And if you accidentally get the UI connected to the charger port or the other way around, it won't damage anything. It just won't work. Okay, let's take a look at the motor controller. So we have power connected to the motor controller, but we need to make a data connection between the Pi hat and the motor controller. So to do that, there is a wire that looks like this in your kit. This is called a Grove wire. It's just the type of connector. This is called a Grove connector. We're going to use that to connect this connector right here on the motor controller to this connector on the hat. So just going to draw that in right here. So we're going to go like this. So there's two similar connectors on the Pi hat. We want to connect the motor up to the one labeled I2C6. Okay, the motor controller also, we also need to connect the two motors up. So the motors came with some multicolored wire. Should be pretty obvious what they are. We're going to go from each motor down to one of the motor control ports. And then we'll go from this one up to here. That's it for the motor controller connections. So let's talk about some of these other wires here that are connected into the power distribution board. The power distribution board has an input for hooking in your charge power. So there's actually two places that charge power can be put into the power distribution board. One is through this barrel jack, the other is through this terminal block. They're both the same. You can put power in either of those to charge the battery. In our setup, we're going to use this terminal block, and it should already be wired up as shown here. Wired up to this terminal block, we have this magnetic charging connector right here. So this magnetic charging connector mates with a similar circuit board right here, which will be mounted in a charging station, and that magnetic connector is connected up to the included power adapter. So as an example of what this looks like on the robot, here's a picture of one of the robots I put together. You can see on the back of the robot I have the magnetic charging connector. So this allows the robot to drive into a docking station to charge. So we will let you know the specs on exactly how that connector needs to be located on your robot so that it can match up with the docking stations that will be provided at the competition. But while you're using your robot at home, you can make your own docking station with these parts right here, so that you can practice docking to your robot at home. So that's it for the power connections and the data connections on your robot.